we online? I should have asked her.
Oh,
okay,
great.
And I will
Time to turn the power on.
Only your PS.
There we go.
That's all they look at.
Okay.
We're good?
Now it's on. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Today is Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. It's my mom's birthday. I'm just giving her a
Happy
quick
birthday,
shout out.
Rebecca's mom.
We're meeting today at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah. And we are going to begin today. Am I missing something? I don't have my paper in front of me. Why am I second guessing myself? Oh yeah, it is 4:39 p.m. There we go. We are going to begin today with a roll call, and Rebecca Nelson, Board President.
Jennifer Partridge, Vice President.
Melanie Hall, Board Member.
Lisa Boyce, Board Member.
Meg Van Wagenen, Board Member.
Hutch Wallace, Student Board Member.
Gina Hales, Board Member.
Karen McCabe, Board Member. Devin Daly, Business Administrator.
Wendy Dow, Superintendent.
And we extend a special welcome to everybody who's here with us in person. We're glad to have everyone and everyone who's online. So thank you so much for joining us. Is there a motion today to convene our study session?
I move that we convene study session.
Thank you so much. Motion made by Board Member Hales. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Partridge. We're now in our study session. We're going to start today with the board handbook training given by Vice President Jennifer Partridge.
Okay, so today, just what's next on the handbook, two different topics, pretty simple. So the first one is graduation ceremonies, and one of the best parts of our job is that we get to go celebrate with the students their accomplishments, and we have a board member that we designate at the beginning of the year who that will be for each school, and our handbook reminds us that board members should speak for no longer than 3 to 5 minutes because they're not there to hear us, right? And then we've got language here of what we say at the end of that to officially accept them as graduates. So
Does that match with what we recently got from
So
Wendy?
I'm already looking at the updated one. I didn't provide you a slide for that today, but yes, in the updated one they've got it there.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thanks.
On top of the job guys. And then the other next section in the handbook is attorney services. I believe we're on page 19.
Thank you.
For whoever's navigating.
How's me?
Okay. It's just that we have attorney services, so some larger districts have their own attorney, but we do not. So we contract with 3 different legal firms for different things, and generally it is our business administrator and our superintendent who contacts them and works with them and definitely arranges for the payment of that. But there are times if the board needs the advice of the attorney, then that goes through the board president. Any questions on either?
Do we already have assignments for speaking at next year's graduation?
We do that in January.
We'll do that in January.
Okay,
Thank you.
I just didn't.
Yeah, we do that one by calendar year. We plan that
Okay.
one. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Alright, item E on our study session, which is the Dixon Community Meeting Planning.
I gotta find the right document. Here we go.
So, I just created this spreadsheet to try to help us narrow the scope, and I purposely made it so that we can kind of have a discussion as to what we want to highlight in our community meeting, which will be held on October 29th at 6 p.m. at Dixon Middle School in the auditorium, followed by an amazing trunk or treat, which I'm very excited for. And so just wanted to make sure that we're capturing kind of some of the discussions that we've had, if there are some benefits or disadvantages that we're missing, if there are other options we want to entertain, and then some questions at the end that you guys are getting from constituents that you feel like that Devin and I need to be prepared to answer. I thought that might be helpful so we can be prepared for that. So we talked about option number 1 being a career and technical education site for secondary students at the Dixon campus, also creating a permanent home for East Bay Post High, a permanent home for adult ed, permanent home for community ed, adding a daycare and a preschool for children of employees, a community pantry. We also talked about we could have an auditorium for community events and do a gymnasium like for junior jazz, or just depending on how much money you want that to cost. Depends on what you, Devin's like, yes, it does depend all on the money. And so we're looking at 50 million probably for just the career and technical education site and to create a permanent home for all of those spaces and the daycare and preschool. If you want to start adding auditorium and gymnasium space, then that's going to increase in terms of the overall cost. Expands our CAPS offerings, allows for more space for our students. I did link in the proposed classes here from Clay. Let's see. Wow, that's so helpful, you can see that. Talking about, and he also talks about how many students per semester and what the upfront costs are to start specific programs and what that looks like. So it's not necessarily you would offer all of these out of the gate, but you would choose based on student interest and also what you have the money to start. And then also notice an expansion of the CAPS program too.
So that's an additional cost to the cost of the structure?
Yes, that's correct.
Whatever costs.
Yeah, these are just program costs. He is fully convinced that he has grant money to handle all of those startup costs. So likely not feeling like that he would need to pull in additional money there. He is stating that there would need to be like perhaps additional FTE that might be needed or reallocation of current FTE. So I think he did a good job of trying to really kind of help us understand what that might look like and what the impact would be.
One thing when I've been sharing in PTA and community council meetings is that we need to clarify we will demolish the current building.
Oh yeah, we do need to clarify that.
Yeah. Because people get confused and I'm like, no, the building will be demolished.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent
We're
point.
going to
It'll be a new
building.
I think there have been individuals who have asked, is there a way where we can, replicate some of the facade and different things, and certainly those things we could, as we design the building, can look at that and they can give us different cost estimates as to what that looks like and whatnot. So that's why we have such a broad range too of what that cost might be.
And the cost for keeping some of the bricks to use some of that would be higher in the demolition cost.
For sure.
So.
Glad you brought that up too. We could sell those bricks if we wanted to.
We could. Wasatch did it and made quite a bit of money several years ago.
See, we have different options there.
26 years ago now. Wasatch Elementary.
You tore something down?
They had bricks that they sold.
Sold bricks.
We did it.
They probably just chopped them out.
Fundraiser.
No. We didn't. There were no chopped fundraiser bricks. We also talked about one of the challenges with MTech is how many classes a day it takes out of a student's schedule, and that if a student isn't really on top of all of their required courses, MTech really becomes a struggle for them to do as a junior or a senior. And so if we were able to put some of those so that it corresponds with our high school schedule, we can cater it towards the AB schedule rather than MTech goes Monday through Thursday with their classes. And so it allows that greater accessibility without students feeling like they have to be ahead. And for many students, where these programs would be really interesting to them, they're not necessarily always going to be the students that are ahead in terms of credit. So we want to make sure that we're providing those opportunities for students who are on track for graduation.
So just feedback as we present this to the community. I would just suggest things like the daycare, the auditorium. Maybe we add the word possible in front. Like some of these other are programs we already have, but for the things we don't yet have, I would hate for someone to have read this one meeting and then think we're promising these certain things, right?
The next, go ahead, Gina. Did you have a question?
No, go ahead. Are you still on option one?
I'm still on
option
great.
one.
What else do I want to say about that? We also felt like if we create a centralized place, it can be easier to hire and maintain highly qualified CTE teachers, because when you're trying to do that at each high school, sometimes you only have enough to fill half of their schedule. So now if they're serving students across the whole district, now I can hire a full FTE to cover a specific certification, and it makes it a little bit more attractive for that teacher that they don't have to travel across the 2 high schools and lose time with that, and they can be located at that particular site. It could also remove the transportation barriers because we could provide transportation to the center, whereas we have some kids that can't get to Lehigh. I mean, that adds additional barriers there. So we would also want to, you know, estimate what cost that would have into any of these programs in terms of how we're transporting them, how many times a day, because you probably have a morning and an afternoon transport that would take place.
So are we going to have those costs available when we? Okay.
Yep, we can.
When we present?
Yes.
Okay.
Next question is, or the disadvantages. Timpanogos Elementary is still overcrowded unless our boundaries are redrawn. The school is still on a busy street, which I've been hearing more and more feedback from individuals about that recently. We still need to find a location for the district office, so it doesn't, you know, it doesn't solve that issue. This system will require some shifting of FTE from some CTE programs into others based on the demands from students. So that concerns people, like, well, what about this program that's been in place for 20 years? If the students now, if their course requests move into another area, then it could shift that FTE over into that other demand area. On the other hand, we're being responsive to the needs of students and what that might look like. And I think I already said this about boundaries. We were already talking about with our boundary and feasibility study that I don't know that I would necessarily say this is a disadvantage to adjust the boundaries for Timpanogos, because we're trying to look at boundary studies for all of our schools to really look at, you know, are we utilizing our spaces appropriately?
So that, my question was on that, because moving it to Dixon, that doesn't have anything to with moving it, right? Because moving it to Dixon wouldn't necessarily change the boundaries. It would be the feasibility study that would change the boundaries.
That's correct. That is correct. I'm glad you provided that clarification. I'll make sure that we clarify that.
I do have one question about this option. So in the past when we talked about this option, you were saying that the CTE type things would only need a section of a larger building. We could still house district offices.
Yes, we
there.
can. We can.
So that's not reflected
Nope.
here.
I need to fix that.
That's why we have the meeting,
This
right?
is why we're.
Okay.
That's why we're
Well, I was just
talking.
gonna ask, did we change
No,
our
we didn't.
perspective on that?
No.
Or, okay.
No, just had a brain cramp.
So on this one, the pro would be that it would take care of our.
It would.
But that would be a
district office
separate
needs.
building project, wouldn't it? Or are you saying you would
can
build
do
them
it all. You can do it all in one.
But
And
for
what?
the same price?
For the 50 to 75 million,
Okay.
I believe you could, because part of this is if you're doing an auditorium or a centralized space, because we need to have a space where we can host all of our teachers and larger professional development and things like that. It would solve that issue, and then we could turn around and rent it to the community for different
That's what they
things
had
too.
at the Jordan.
Yeah.
They had that big auditorium
Yeah.
space. They were doing professional development at the
Yeah.
time we went and toured it.
Yeah.
Interesting. And we would need a big enough space for our board meetings.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. Option number 2, which we've been getting some more feedback on, I think particularly like Gina and Terry have been hearing more about this, but rebuilding Timpanogos Elementary on the Dixon site itself, and then retrofit the current elementary, Timpanogos Elementary, to house a career and technical education site and to also house the district office. We'll add the phrase possible daycare and preschool for children of employees. I would need to look at the square footage. I don't believe we would have the space to do East Bay, Post High, Adult Ed, Community Ed, all at that location with the district offices, but we do have other properties where we could look at that, such as Grandview, as we've moved more and more of those offices down here to the district office, and then as we retrofit Timpanogos Elementary. The approximate cost of this is $75 million would be your starting cost, right? Because your elementary school is starting at $50 million, and then the retrofit of Timpanogos Elementary would be probably another $25 million. some of the advantages, a lot of people have been concerned about Timpanogos Elementary being on 5th West, which is a really busy street and access and what that looks like. Being able to expand the place-based areas for students by designing an elementary school that has adequate space. Addresses our current space and capacity issues. We currently have 634 students. We could have an on-site preschool, community center. One of the things that we've heard is frustrating is the limited space that is available, and the students can't access preschool at Timpanogos Elementary. They have to access it at a different site. So we could, and this could be a benefit too of the other options. We do have other district properties that we can sell as we resolve these issues. Those aren't things that would be sold right away, but as these projects complete, then that's property that we can determine. I think our boundary and feasibility study will give us some good indications of what properties would be in our best interest to think about selling, and then utilizing the money that we make off of that to offset bond payments and whatnot that we would have to acquire. Same thing as long as you have a CTE program, and if we do have the ability to provide a daycare and a preschool, it provides a huge incentive for employees to stay because daycare is getting to be so expensive. Anyway, it does, I think a major advantage of this option as well as the prior option is that both of these proposals will solve our facility needs with the exception of the rebuild of Timpview, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But in terms of the Dixon site, the district office, those things that we have identified need to be redone in the next 5 years would be resolved in both of these cases. I think a disadvantage is that it could create frustration with the public since Timpanogos Elementary is not that old, so now you're rebuilding it at a different location. Does that create major trust issues? Because we are rebuilding a school and then retrofitting, it is going to require a higher cost. It does cost more money than keeping Timpanogos at its current location. On the other hand, it creates probably better facilities all around for all of the different needs that we have, so it fulfills those needs at a higher level across the board. Option number 3, we've talked.
Can we go back?
Yeah, please.
So, just again, as we present this to the community, I think it was in that middle column there that you talked about, where is it? Oh yeah, other district properties could be sold. I would just remove that from this section, because that's true of the first option as well, and just put that in the financial section.
Okay,
One of the big questions we're going to want to talk about is how to pay for it.
Yep.
So I think that could go in there instead of the individual program.
I like that. Option number 3, we've talked about consolidating some of our dual immersion programs, possibly creating 2 different sites. We could create a site at the Dixon site that houses 2 of the 4 languages for dual immersion. Once you start getting beyond that, you're going to start pushing an elementary school being 700 or 800 or 900 students, which I'm not in huge favor of. I don't love elementary schools quite that big. And then convert another elementary school to a language school for the other 2 languages. As you're doing the boundary and feasibility study, then obviously you would have to have some boundary, variations and discussions there. The advantage of that is it removes that segregation of students that's happening in some of our schools where you have those that are in DLI and those who are not. So all the students at these 2 locations would be learning another language, and you get a greater integration of students across your specialty classes, so they're not traveling as this cohort throughout their entire schedule for 6 years, which is what happens with DLI. It can create greater efficiency of the DLI model, although some other adjustments are likely needed to be made in terms of our policy, so that we don't end up with this disparity of DLI classes being at 12 and a non-DLI class being at over 30, or figuring out what does that look like so that we can be responsible with those resources. A disadvantage, fewer students choose DLI because it is no longer located in their neighborhood school. There are many individuals that choose DLI because it is close to them and they see the advantages of that. And then, you know, if you want to remove that barrier, then you would want to provide transportation then to increase access, so it doesn't become a, you know, because I have a parent who can drive me to this location, then I can access that, but then that also increases the cost because you're now providing transportation. This is something that could be considered in terms of our overall boundary and feasibility study, as if we create, you know, language magnet sites without it incorporating this Dixon piece, right? So it is an option to build a school that can accommodate that, but we can also use existing structures to do that and still utilize the Dixon site for other pieces as we see need to do. And then
can I ask a question about that third option? So with the third option, because right now we have at Timpanogos they have a lot of Spanish speakers, right? And they're not doing the state-sponsored DLI. So would this include Timpanogos students, or is this only the state?
No, I would keep Timpanogos separate from that and almost, you know, start maybe even a recommendation depending on what the boundary and feasibility study shows. I just think Timpanogos has had some tremendous success that's been happening, that we should maybe look at converting that entire school into that it really is a bilingual school, and that when you're choosing Timpanogos Elementary, that's the direction we're going. And then the other programs would still follow that state model.
Okay.
That's kind of what we have talked a little bit about as a school leadership team.
Right, you still have a Spanish program.
Yeah, we would still have a, yes,
so that's
exactly.
the thing, you have
Yep.
that kind of,
Yep.
makes sense.
I think there could be some real advantages if we got more students actually involved in that piece of it. So I just started making a list of commonly asked questions, and Devin has not answered any of these questions. This is all Wendy's understanding of this, so Devin's gonna go in and fix all of this so that it actually is making sure that we're accurate in this. But how can we afford to pay for the Dixon site when we have to finish the rebuild of Timpview High School? How do we finance these construction projects? We have talked about municipal building authority bonds. Devin has mentioned that the rates for those bonds, is that how you spell geo bonds? Did I spell that right?
Yep.
General
That's what I thought. I thought it was just an abbreviation for general obligation. Thank you. We could issue those municipal building authority bonds to finish the construction of Timpview and get that going quickly. And then we're hoping that would remain relatively cost neutral. Devin would speak more to that piece. What do you want to say about that?
Well, I don't know that we would be cost neutral. It would be a little bit higher, but it would, with the bond falling off in 2026,
should be affordable.
We would, it would
be a
have a
significant
minimal impact.
What's the bond that's falling? Someone asked me this and I didn't know the answer.
These are the refundings.
Provo Peaks.
So this is the Provo Peaks bond that we refunded in 2021 or 2012.
So Devin, as I've been at PTA meetings recently, there are parents asking for specific numbers, so if there's a way we can at least get a ballpark.
I've sent stuff to the
Is it $10 a month?
I will get you something.
Okay.
Specific numbers, that was my thought too.
Yes, I had sent something, I'm just waiting to hear back. And I will nag one more time.
Thank you.
And then I will get out my handy dandy calculator and figure it out myself.
We had also talked about then what is the guarantee for the Dixon community that building gets funded if we're using these municipal building authority, a municipal building authority bond to fund Timpview. We would solicit a bond, a general obligation bond from the public for that 50 to 75 million needed for the Dixon site, and or reconfiguration of current Timpanogos Elementary. And if that bond did not pass, I would like us to state that we would still honor our commitment to that community by, we can issue an additional municipal building authority bond to continue funding that.
Just as long as we don't go over
200 million in 3 years.
Total.
Yep.
I would suggest that in this bullet we change the woulds to coulds.
You got it.
Because these are decisions that we're wanting their input on. So again, I don't want them to think this is already our plan, right?
All the
'Cause
woods.
there are other, I mean, there's other ways we could approach it, so.
Another question, you know, what would the financing of these construction projects do to our property tax rate? What would the interest rate be on these potential bonds? Those would be some questions we'll have to have an answer. And why would we continue the construction of Timpview and rebuild the Dixon site if we have to secure bonds to do so? The question that I get from the public is, why are you not just working within the money that you actually have? You know, why do you want to keep borrowing money? I don't borrow money, and so I think that's something that we need to be prepared to answer as to why this rises to that level of where we would ask for that.
Under the bullets, under number 1, is that where then you could add maybe a bullet about property that could be sold?
Yes.
As just another potential way to finance?
Yep.
And as part of that, maybe a ballpark of how much in the millions, because really the amount, I mean, some people are like, sell this property and that will pay for all of Dixon,
That will
and it's
come
not,
right, it won't.
right?
Yeah.
So we just have to let them know it would be a
Could offset
small
it by
percentage.
Like 20 million, 25 million,
Maybe
10 million.
Not even
I
that.
don't
Well, it
even
depends
think
what
we
we
get
would
much
sell and
for
how
it.
much we would
Depends on
sell.
how convincing I am to make people pay more money.
That is true.
What other questions are you getting? That's all I was able to generate, but what are the questions besides like the specific numbers and things that we want to be ready to answer and that we can have on this kind of one pager that we also want to have available for people?
So just the other specific number, that 50 to 75 million, because if the Timpview part is minimal impact, then, and then we're saying we're doing another 50 to 75.
I'll get the
Just to make sure we've got those,
exact
yeah.
rates for all of them and what it would look like over time, because we do have other bonds that will fall off.
That would be good.
In a few years, I can't say a few, it's several years, but it's not like the full amount. Another thing to keep in mind, and as you're answering questions, you know, why do you have to borrow? Well, we generate just enough property taxes to deal with our operating costs and capital. So our basic repairs and maintenance, our salary for our maintenance personnel. And so we're not, it would be kind of irresponsible of me to over generate property taxes in order to create a slush fund every month to save enough money. And where you have a cost of $50 million, that's 5 years of not spending anything on capital, you know. And if you are only saving $500,000 or $600,000 a year, in 10 years we might get enough. You know, 20 years we might get enough to do something, but at the same time we've now had people overpay. So really what we're doing is just trying to put the property taxes at the time we're actually going to use it.
Well, and haven't we found ourselves as a district before in the situation where not investing on an ongoing basis in some of our capital facilities
Correct.
has
I mean, some of the
created
questions,
some
right.
significant impact
Some of the
on
questions that we
taxes.
had in some of the community meetings were, well, does this mean you're going to take care of your buildings now? Well,
right.
That's one of the things that we've done over the last few years is really focus on creating not just a replacement cycle, but a maintenance cycle for a lot of our buildings and equipment. So I think all of that requires resources, and we're trying to do more with less, but at the same time, there's still additionally more that needs to be done.
Can I add one thing that was always taught and told to me was that we can't save only a certain percentage, right? There's a certain percentage we're allowed to
General
save.
fund, on your restricted, on the
Right.
committed fund balance, you're limited to 5%.
5%.
The other one, it's just a basic, good business model of, so, I mean, you can keep, and we have a fund balance in all of our
Right.
funds.
Right.
And it's not illegal to have that. I mean, in a lot of school districts, they have a basic, policy that they will keep a 20% unassigned fund balance, which is pretty high. I mean, that's over 30 million for us, just in the unassigned section. So it's not something that I don't want to overtax at the time that we're doing things, but I want to tax enough to where we're not having to beg, borrow, and steal to make the basic needs. Right. So.
Is the 55 million number there that you said we could issue, oh good, I'm sorry, we could issue 55 million to finish the construction of Timpview, is that a number we can lead out with and say, this is the cost approximately of finishing the rest of the phases of Timpview?
That's what I feel like is the number they landed on.
Okay.
And that is the range that they've landed on. We should have a set of plans any day for the rest of it that, you know, we can do we go out for bids for the cafeteria part and then the next 3 buildings. And so we'll have a better idea then, but.
I just feel concerned sometimes when I'm talking with people, they'll say, well, you changed the numbers. First it was this number and then it was that, you know, and even though someone might understand in that conversation that construction costs and things are variable, they'll feel like we stated a cost. So I just wanted to be clear, like, this is an estimated cost to finish Timpview. These are models around, like, this is a path you could go or a direction you could go to fund, not this is the plan, right? Until we see plans and know even closer, like, because that's just one number. It's not really a range. If you said we could issue 45 to 50, you know what I mean? So I just want to make sure that we are really clear on what we are and aren't saying about what we know so far and what we would have to.
Well, and one of the challenges that we're dealing with is in 2019 when we started talking about the cost of Timpview, construction costs grew exponentially. So in the end, we're going to be spending a ton more on Timpview than we ever would had we started in 2019 like we were planning on. And so if they're going back and holding us to those numbers we set in 2019, that's not realistic.
It was a whole different.
And it was a different plan. It was pretty much the same overall plan of what the school was going to look like, but just in different phases as opposed to the way that we did it. So unfortunately, people like to pull in that like one offhand comment from 5 years ago to say, well, it's more expensive than what you said it was going to be.
Right.
Well, those construction costs have grown so
even right now though,
significantly.
we were saying 50 recently, and so
Yep.
now we're saying 55. So I think that is good. We just say approximately
And
until
that's
we have the plans.
and so when we got the range, it was 45 to 55, and we were kind of going in the middle. That 55 will give us the cushion that we need for all the change orders that we'll get, because we all know that the change orders are never going to stop.
What is the timeline on when we can get like the plans for the rest of the phases for Timpview? Approximately how much we can get for like our cost offsets when you said about the properties? Like when can we get those numbers in and like right in front of us?
So I expect to get the plans for Timpview in the next month, right?
Okay.
So and then we will go and we'll go the CMGC route, which is kind of a construction management. They manage the bid process, the construction, and it's most often the contractor that we end up using for the building. And we'll do that sometime in the next 3-4 months. I would expect by February we'll have those bids released for at least the cafeteria, if not for the rest of it as well. Because the cafeteria was the first piece that we wanted to start, and depending on what those costs come back at, it might be something we can do between a bridge of going out for another bond if we want to wait until fiscal year 2026. So the first payment's not due till the bond comes off the next year. So there's all kinds of things that we're working on with that. And then, I mean, we'd have to go out and get actuary costs for our land, and we'd have to have somebody who's interested. So timeline, that's a very good question. It could be fast. It could be, at least 6 months to a year.
But before we write up a plan to write for a bond, for example, we should know, I feel like, what the property,
right.
What are those other offset options, as realistically as possible look like, so that we choose a number that shows that we're using the resources we can.
Oh, absolutely. But also in the middle of that are people fighting for us not to sell the land that we've got. And so we've got to evaluate which land that we are realistically not gonna use before we decide to, because once you sell land, you can't get it back.
And we're in the feasibility study may help.
Yeah.
That piece.
I agree.
So that's more,
I think it'd just be more important to maybe list which properties we maybe be clear about which ones we own. We don't necessarily know what the value
Yeah.
of each of those
Yeah.
pieces are, but just being transparent about what that looks like.
So the questions I'm getting the most, and we've already discussed one, is can we move Timpanogos off? And I get people on both sides, people who don't think it needs to be moved and people who do think it needs to be moved. So I think just having that discussion is great. Another one that they're asking is the timeline for this project, and I recognize that we don't know necessarily, and it will depend on a lot of things, but I think we'll need to somehow say we're planning to get the, like, we're hopefully looking at 2027 to 28 or whatever it is, but just giving them a general idea I think will help. And the last thing is, and this is what I'm getting the most about, is the tennis courts. So I'm just going to warn you, they're going to ask about the tennis courts, and they have, in fact, they have a proposal, well, they're putting together a proposal to pay for it until the school, I've been very clear, the school's demolished, but we're not going to put anything into it now, but they have money, or there's someone that has money that they want. Anyway, that proposal's coming, I will forward that on to you, but they're going to ask about the tennis courts. So we just need to be prepared for that. Even if, we need to be prepared for why, justifying why we aren't having tennis courts or are having tennis courts or whatever.
I hate the tennis courts there.
I'd be fine if we can also paint them so they're pickleball courts as well as tennis.
Well, and
does that make it more attractive to you?
No,
I love
emails I
pickleball,
get are they don't want pickleball.
It's because it's loud, it keeps people awake.
I like pickleball.
My community that's specifically asking for this, this is what I've been getting the most. They wouldn't mind pickleball, but I know that there are other organizations I've heard from in the past that don't want pickleball. But I mean, if we're willing to entertain it at all, we probably make it the most accessible to everybody. But I've tried to tell them, and I've given them numbers that Nate gave me because he had someone independently do it. It's really expensive, right? It's expensive to put them in. It's really expensive to maintain them, and so I just wanted to.
And that's why
we need to be prepared.
We are already getting a lot of pressure from a few families that are wanting us to refinish the
right now.
Yeah, I got pickleball. I love pickleball. Don't get me wrong, but it's also not something that I want to hand over to somebody else to manage a project like that. And we have so many needs around the district of things that are actually used at our schools that it's hard for me to justify doing that, repairing those at a very high cost for a school that we may be tearing down and not using.
No, and I agree, and I've told them that they have a program they think will pay for it, and so I've been very clear. If this were to be approved, and I'm not saying it would be approved, but if it were to be approved, and if you do have someone that would pay for it and to redo it, it will likely be torn down once the new project comes. And so that's why I've asked them to put together a proposal that then I would bring to you, and then we can look at it, and then decide from there. I have made no promises, but I do want something to look at.
If they're wanting to pay for it, it would be considered a donation, and one that large would have to be approved by the board.
Okay.
And so if that's what you wanted to do, then that would be something that you guys could vote on.
But
And
they're
we're
going to
gonna
ask
talk
if
about it in
whatever we
policy.
build there is also going to have tennis courts built, and so we need to be prepared to tell them no decisions have been made on that,
Right.
and we would have to see how it fits into our goals as to what the site's for.
I agree. I just wanted to warn you, it's coming.
I will put together a presentation with Devin. We'll get that to you by Monday so that you can preview it, so you can provide feedback before we do our meeting on Tuesday.
Thank you. Thanks for the work on that.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we will now have our annual audit and financial report. And I believe we have our
Yep, Erin is
long-time
here.
friend here.
Very well. So
You
this
don't mind
is
standing up
our
so the
auditor.
video can see
He's
you?
excited about being able to present. And did you? Okay, I'm going to bring it up on the screen.
That would be easiest for you guys.
So let me. So,
You said
and
we
no
would talk
worries,
about
we
it.
are gonna talk about it in finance committee as well, so I wanted to give you plenty of time to formulate your questions, so we weren't trying to open your head and pour in a lot of information that you've already heard a bunch of times. So.
Oh, we're waiting for Devin to pull up the screen.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, go ahead, but then you have
Yeah,
the
am I pulling up
screen.
the after or the?
Surprise me, I'll talk about whatever you pull up.
Ooh, it's the.
He's got the app
It's
in
the
his hand.
PDF roulette.
Yes.
Make it exciting here. Well, I have to
There's,
make finance exciting.
yeah, I was like,
Oh, you succeeded.
this will be the pinnacle of excitement.
Erin and I talk a lot about how we spend a lot of time doing something that no one reads and no one cares about but us.
It is, but it's so important.
Yes.
Well, it's legally required, so I
Yeah.
mean.
It does have value, and I don't want to diminish its value. However, it's really hard when you do put a lot of heart and soul into this document, and it becomes outdated pretty quickly.
It's still right, though, as of
Yes.
June 30th, forevermore.
It will be, but and so the utility of the report is there, and you know, as you were talking, a lot of this meeting when I walked in is forecasting expenditures and trying to budget for the future, and this clearly talks about the past, and so I understand that, and it's good. So we're going to start with the federal single audit and the Utah State Audit Compliance Report. This really is a good report. So anytime a local entity expends, not receives, but expends at least $750,000 of federal grants, you are required to have a single audit, where we analyze all of the grants that you received, and we put them into two categories of type A and type B, and then we say, okay, this is a major program, and then we will test in more detail, and then the other ones, depending on where they fall, we will gain an understanding of the control environments, and then the other ones just kind of get left there. And so if you scroll down to the actual, we'll start with the opinion on page 1. And so one of the most important services that we provide in this area is a report on internal controls over financial reporting and compliance. And so audits have really evolved into, instead of looking at whether a particular number is right or wrong, they really want us to focus on the process of how that number came to be. And is the school district putting a lot of resources or sufficient resources into the control environment? Do you have proper segregation of duties when applicable? Do you have bonding when people are handling cash? Do you train them? And if not only training that they are required to have, but if you have employees that really want to expand their knowledge base, and they come to you and say, this course would be really good for me. Are you supportive of that? And do you train people at all levels? If you say you have an open door policy, do you truly have an open door policy, or are you conveying it in such a way that you say it on paper, but then the very first, somebody comes to another director or another person and says, I have this concern, if the very first response is, well, did you go to your direct report? That says right there that you're not open door. So we look at all of those and just try to understand, do you have good internal controls? And I can tell you that I believe that there is a really good tone at the top. And I feel that Devin and her team and Steve and his team really try and strive to not only ensure that internal controls are in place, but they are operating as designed. And so we spend a lot of time doing that, and we do feel like the the internal controls over not only financial reporting but compliance and other matters with the federal grants, as well as the state audit compliance, are in good order. And so we will now go to the actual second report, and that is with the state of Utah. So the state of Utah has said, we, in addition to everything that you do for the financial reporting and everything that you do for federal grants, we also want you to have your auditors look at state compliance with their codes and their laws and their and so you'll see here that if you go to the second page. No, it probably is. It's rebranded, but the state says that where there are certain things they want us to look at every year, and there are certain things that they want us to look at every third year. And what's interesting about that is every year they change those categories. And so sometimes, yeah, it rotates in and out, and so we are looking at those. This is your schedule of expenditures of federal awards, affectionately known as the CFA. You can see that you expended $24 million during the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. Of that, $32,000 was direct awards, and the rest of it was passed through. That isn't shocking. It's not a negative or a positive. It just means that most of your federal grants come through another entity, the state or Provo City or whatnot. And so that's just telling you the source. It's just being passed through. You can see that we have a lot of grants. Some of them are in the millions, and some of them are just a few thousand or $100,000s of dollars. And so they matter, but not as much. And so we are required to ensure that anything that is very large, in the millions, that it is looked at least every third year. And so we rotate these grants in, and so if you go to the next page, that's the opposite direction.
No, I had the down arrow was back at the beginning. So.
Okay, keep going to the summary page right here. This just says that we issued an unmodified report, and that's the highest report that we can give, and that there were no deficiencies in in financial reporting, both at the material weakness and significant deficiency level. There were no material compliance issues. And then the major programs that we tested this year, we'll skip a little bit, is the Title I grants and the 21st Century Community Learning grants, as well as the Medicaid Assistance Program. You were considered at the beginning of the audit a low-risk auditee, and you ended as a low-risk auditee. And that's good. And what that really means is we are required to test more, 20% if you're low of total expenditures, 40% if you're high. And that just means we would have to test more if we felt that you were a high risk, meaning you've had findings in the past, or we just feel like your internal control environment is not well designed or does not operate as designed. And so there was one minor finding I just want to bring to your attention, but we left it as a verbal finding, and that just means that we leave it at the management level. I'm bringing it to your attention just because I think that it is a good thing. There was one fund that had some expenditures that in total you were over budget, but that's already been remedied. It was known, the budget has been amended, it is done. And so we felt that it was not a material non-compliance issue with the state law that requires that your budget is always in a positive situation, and this line item was in a negative situation. It was one out of very, very many. And so I would bet a medium fry at McDonald's that you'll never even hear about it from the state of Utah, but you could. And your answer is it's already remedied, and fixed, and so it's good in that regard. And so that is the federal and state reporting issues. Before I move to the main financial report, are there any questions or comments that any of you would like to raise?
Thank you.
You're
for
welcome.
doing your work.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it.
So this is a report that literally has, what's the ending page number? 111 pages. I don't think it's prudent for me to bore any of you with going through it page by page, or even in any detail, just because, as Devin said, she's going to present this at a subcommittee level in great detail. I think that is an appropriate place for this. So what I wanted to just talk about is not only of the coolness of the cover page, but we issued an unmodified opinion. That's the highest opinion that we can give as independent auditors. And we looked at the internal control environment and found no issues. There are no findings that we have related to financial reporting or internal controls. I do feel like the tone, compared to last year to this year, well, I'm going to go 3 years. I think that there was a palpable difference at the end of during the audit last year than there was the previous year, and I felt like that was a stressful tone when we would talk to people. I feel this year it is gone. It is back to a normal, positive tone, and I don't know how to say that other than it's just when we would talk to people about things and we would just try to get an understanding of the control environment and how people feel, and overall morale when we're talking about it just changed. And right now I do feel that it's very positive, and I feel that's important to note. I call them audit warm fuzzies. When I am an auditor, and you can go ask somebody a question and you can get the right answer, or the answer that they're expecting to give. For instance, if I come up to somebody and say, do you follow your policies? Yes, I do. Does the district have policies and procedures? Yes, they do. Those are the right answers. If I follow it up with, can you show them to me? And then they just look at me with a blank stare. That just tells me that they have policies, but they have even no idea how to reference them. And so that just tells me that, okay, maybe I need to look at this a little differently. And so when I am asking questions, I'm always trying to build those audit warm fuzzies. The comfort level, I want it to be high when I'm asking about certain things. And so we talked about equity and fund balance, and so I wanted to just go to the financial statements and talk about one aspect of equity, and focus just my efforts on that. If you go to page 30. Well, if you were trying to anticipate my move, that's impressive. Okay, net position at the government-wide level. So you have total net position or equity of $217 million. That's great. However, when you dissect it, this is where I feel like it's a good educational information to focus on. Of that $217 million, $100 million is capital assets, schools and equipment and chairs and carpet and screens and whatnot. You can't spend this. And so it's really, when you understand your equity, a healthy equity balance is great, but that doesn't mean that you've got lots of money to play with. And then when you look at it even further, this next category is restricted for. And so when you're looking at 8 million, 44 million, 20 million, 3 million, 3 million, 3 million, all of that says that we have this money, but we are forced externally to spend it in a certain way. And so again, of your 217 million, everything but this 37 million is restricted or non-spendable equity. And so that is something that I think you should understand and be educated on, not only at your level, but I think a conversation when you have at the community level, when you're talking schools, is also very good. Listening to the discussion, education in the community is huge. A comment was made when, like people are saying, my household budget, I minimize debt, and you seem to be maximizing debt, and that's a problem. Well, I'd say we're not running a household. We're running a school, and there is a enormous amount of infrastructure that needs to come into play before we can operate a school. And where does that come from? And so I think educating the community of the differences between a household and a school district is huge, because otherwise what's going to happen is people are just going to always assume that how I know money is how you should spend money, and that's just improper. And so that's really what I wanted to focus my my attention on. You know that you're building schools. You know that you have a lot of unspent bond proceeds. Less unspent this year than you did in the previous year because construction is happening. The operating grants and contributions increased about $16 million this year over the prior year. 100% of the grants and contributions that you get from the state or other local governments is not for capital purposes. It is for operating, and the capital is coming from your municipal building authority bonds and other bonds, and that is normal. That's expected. I do feel that the tone at your level as well at the lower level is that we want to minimize debt. We know it's a necessary tool, but that very much is there, and so I feel very comfortable with how management operates, and I feel that they are doing what you expect of them. And so with that, I'll answer any other questions that any of you may have.
Any questions?
I did.
Okay.
I don't know, they're for you. But on page 23 to 25 on the
23 to 25.
PDF.
Correct. Those
Oh.
are the one. That's where the opinion letter will go.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So don't worry. That will be
Which
put in. We just
are you
removed
talking the main one or the single
the
audit?
main
Okay.
opinion.
Yeah,
is
it was
not an
just
acronym.
blank and I
Oh,
was
it's
like,
blank. Yeah, that's because I can't issue a signed opinion until we get the response from your attorneys.
Okay.
One of the biggest things, and we can't do that until the very, very, very end.
Gotcha.
I saw that it hit my email on the drive here, and so I will be able to finalize that and get it. The other thing that I like is the board approves the financial statements. We are hired by the board because we need to be independent of management. And so if we come here with a finalized, signed, sealed, delivered, bound, prettied up report and say, do you approve this? The message we're saying is, please don't not, because we've already finalized it. And so it just kind of, I don't want it to feel like a rubber stamp. So if we do bring it in draft form, which it is, it's very much a changeable document. And so if you do want something presented a different way or worded a different way, you absolutely have that latitude to do so.
Okay, and then on page 9, PDF 17, and page 10, PDF 18.
Okay.
The structure of the school district is incorrect.
I think it was last year.
Oh,
Yeah.
yep.
It very well.
Yep.
And then on the other page, it lists the wrong principles.
These would be the
That-
principles as of
last
June
year.
30th.
From last year.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
have to
So
be
they
from
have
last
to be
year.
the
I looked at
principles
that
as
too.
of June
June
30th.
30th.
Yep.
Okay.
So the only thing that we could offer is we could make that more clear by putting a subheader that says as of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so that people know it's outdated.
Yeah.
Actually,
That would
that's
be
a good
better.
idea.
So sorry
That's
if
why I looked at it and went, That's
Yeah.
not right.
Right, and,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was right.
Yeah.
On June 1st,
On
it was
June
right.
30th, it was
Or
right.
June 30th.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep, I'll
So-
get that fixed and send a new one out.
Okay. That's
Okay.
all I had.
Great.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right,
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And good job.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
Well,
sharing your
and I
context
couldn't
and
do it without my team.
Yeah.
That was
I really
Steve.
appreciate
Steve is
that.
You bet.
awesome, so I appreciate his work.
He's all right.
So
cute. Good job.
We
All
have
right.
a warm fuzzy.
A warm fuzzy, yes.
I know.
I have a business and finance pen that's Scrooge.
It's coming.
It's
What?
Scrooge.
Hey.
That's not
Are
a
you
warm
serious?
fuzzy finance pen.
You guys, no.
It's amazing, she designed it.
Well, Shauna helped.
Caleb, yeah, but
And
that's her idea.
it has the Scrooge hat, but it says McWow, so it is a
Wow.
Just so you know.
There you go.
There is something
That
nice
is
about
amazing.
Debbie.
I like it. Well, thank you, McWow.
Thank you.
McWow.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. On my desk.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you
to see
very much.
All right, on to our policy review. I'm gonna
See,
laugh
I have
about
warm
that all
fuzzies.
night long.
I know you got like a warm fuzzy award just now. I wanted to hand you a pin, but I don't have any.
It's all good. I don't need a pen.
You can have this.
Oh, I'm giving her a bibbidi bobbidi boo pin.
For sure.
Actually, yeah,
That's
and
a
no
warm-
findings,
Oh,
you need
yeah.
a pin.
And
She's
warm
got a pin.
fuzzies.
And
No
warm
findings
fuzzies.
and warm fuzzies.
Yes.
Spoon. I'm telling you, this spoon is all yours.
I'll do that not too quick. It's the golden
It's trying to
spoon.
connect.
I remember over your New Year's Eve, your spoons.
It's been having issues today.
Hold on.
Here we go. All right. I don't know if this is the right one I wanted to start with. Actually, we'll start with that one. There we go.
Come
Okay.
on, finance ones are so fun.
I'm gonna let you. I gotta hit the right button here. I promise I'll catch us up, Rebecca. Here we go.
Oh, you're good. We have plenty of time.
Okay.
honestly. I mean, not that I want you to take a long time, but.
That's so strange that we don't want to take a long time on policy. Okay, so this is in our 4000 series. This is policy 41 to 58, which is a new policy that is coming from state law, so you won't see a current policy attributed to this, but this is about non-enrolled student participation in district activities. What it does is it establishes the requirements for the participation of charter school students, private school students, homeschool students, and online students in district activities, and in particular athletics at our high schools, as well as music, drama, performing arts, debate, all of that takes place at our high schools.
Would this include like the summer trips that middle schools go to?
Technically, yes, it would include that.
Okay.
So non-enrolled student participation in district activities, you have to meet initial eligibility requirements. This is what many people don't understand about UHSAA requirements for the establishment of initial eligibility. For athletics, when you're in 9th grade, as long as the school has a space for you, you can enroll at that school. It's part of open enrollment, and as a homeschool student or as a charter school student, you can go to any school that you want to. So even if it's not the preference is it's your boundary school, but technically you can establish that eligibility wherever you want. So I could be a homeschool student that lives in Salt Lake City, and I could establish my boundary school. I want to participate in Provo High. I'm not saying that wrong, right?
You're right.
Okay.
But that
Making
doesn't
sure.
mean you don't, I mean, like, let's say we don't have any room at Provo High. I don't accept kids I don't have room for, right? I don't have to accept every child that wants to come.
It
right?
depends. If they're a charter school student, an online student, or a private school student that doesn't offer that, and they live in your boundary, you have to take them regardless.
Okay, I mean out
Yes,
of boundary.
but you have to be at 90% capacity to turn down that kid, and you can't accept any other kid then into that program.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
So once you accept one in, you gotta accept everybody.
Right, so
in
it
at
still
that
has to
point.
go within like acceptance, like rules and regulations, right? But, okay, that's what I'm trying to.
So, and you have to meet the academic requirements as well. So for UHSAA, it requires a 2.0 GPA, not for ninth graders coming in. There are no academic requirements coming in for an incoming ninth grader. It doesn't start until the end of first quarter of their ninth grade year, so they don't look at their eighth grade year or anything like that. If the school, however, has requirements such as like to participate in music or drama or debate, that they have to have a certain GPA. All of those same requirements apply if you're a homeschool student or a charter school student, but I'm going to get to some exceptions.
So marching band is not UHSAA requirements, but
it's a district
school.
activity.
Okay.
That is correct. Your eligibility requirements then, so now I've established my eligibility, I've tried out for a team, I'm participating in athletics. The eligibility requirements for me as one of those outside entities, it's the same as the requirements for students who are fully enrolled in the district, with a few exceptions. So same requirements for the extracurricular activities. So say, for example, a high school says you have to have a 3.0 GPA to participate in cheer, then the same rule applies if you're a charter school student that is participating. You would have to have that 3.0 GPA. For a homeschool student, this is where it gets tricky because you don't technically have a transcript. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But most schools do have attendance requirements for students to participate in extracurricular activities. Those cannot be applied to a homeschool student. There are no attendance requirements. Homeschool students' eligibility requirements that a parent will submit an affidavit stating that their child meets the eligibility requirements. And with that affidavit, they're basically stating, yes, my student is mastering the material in each course, and yes, they're maintaining progress toward achievement and or promotion. It's just a statement that says these are the things, and if you request it, I can produce evidence.
And do they have to submit that each year?
Yes, you have to submit it before each season. So if it's fall sports, you would submit that at the beginning.
Music or whatever.
You would do it at the beginning of the year. Yep. If someone comes and challenges the affidavit, so say somebody comes in and says, I don't actually believe that that student has met those requirements, I don't think that parent's doing anything with that homeschool student, then they take that challenge to the principal, and the principal has to formulate an academic eligibility panel, which is constituted of 3 people. Each one of those individuals has to have homeschool experience. So there's one person that has to be a university level individual that has homeschool experience, someone that's a licensed educator that has homeschool experience, and somebody who's been a homeschool parent. So that's your academic eligibility panel that is defined in the policy.
And this is according to state law.
State law.
And the principal that has to lead it.
Yep. Then the panel they'll form the panel will request test scores or a portfolio of work and determine if the eligibility criteria are met. Fees are the same as they are for a fully enrolled district student. If they're coming from a charter school or an online school, then the charter school generally will pay they'll submit a check from that charter school to the school district for that if they're on a fee waiver. So that's coming from the other entity. All fees are paid prior to participation, so you can prohibit them from participating if they're not up on their fees. We generally try to work with kids in our own program, but that is a requirement of the law that they have to be paid ahead of time for the students. What questions do you have?
Does the panel get reimbursed for their time? Or
Great
the principal?
question. No.
Okay. And that's not in the legislation?
I don't believe so, no.
I don't have a question, but I do want to just point out that we are planning to go ahead and vote on this tonight. It's mostly a state law type thing. It's not really something we can really take any feedback on. So we are voting on it.
It's just an understanding of I think a lot of times there are misconceptions about how eligibility gets established, and there are lots of different things that are happening in schools. This is one of those policies that goes into effect. We need to recognize that a lot of this is beyond district policy. This is happening at the UHSAA level and also at the legislative level because of how open enrollments work and how how those processes are set up, and that a ninth grader coming in is never seen as a transfer student. It's never the case.
Can I just for clarification on the enrollment piece, like let's say that 10th grader homeschool student that wants to play football, okay? If they live out of the boundaries, do the same UHSAA rules go to that kid?
Depends. So the UHSAA rules will always apply, but if the 10th grade student has not established eligibility anywhere, they would not be considered a transfer student. It's only if they had established eligibility elsewhere, then yes, the transfer rules would apply in that instance. It's a great question. All right, there's that one. That was exciting. Let's move to finance.
Now we really get to
Oh, now we get rolling, people. You have no idea. This is very exciting.
This is some pretty scintillating stuff.
Oh, good word.
So we have the donation and fundraising policy. Really, there's just a little bit of just updates, clarifications to what.
Add whatever else you need to add. I did my best.
No, you did awesome.
Okay.
I might not be as succinct as Wendy is, but I will do my best. So it just standardizes the donation and fundraising policy, makes statements that we will make sure it's equitable between schools, that we will, that all donations, regardless of whether they're monetary or items, in excess of 10,000, have to have superintendent approval. Anything over 50,000 must have the Board of Education approval. So we can take it with the new fee rules. There's fundraisers are no longer on the fee schedule, which is really nice, and that also means that fundraised money does not have to be refunded because it can go to the program, which is, and it didn't ever have to be, but the way that the law was written made it seem like it could be. So any questions on donations and fundraising? I did move those two paragraphs you suggested it just under the guidelines or basic guiding principles, I believe it was under, of what we're doing for our fundraising.
And just to be clear, each individual school can handle their own fundraising just directly through their school.
Correct. They do have donation accounts at their schools, and objects, and just making sure that they've got that object so we can track and make sure that their donations and their they already have a fundraising object and a donations object, so we can actually track those.
And annually you'll look at each school's donation, in-kind and cash donations, but in excess of $10,000, then the process changes.
Correct. In excess of $10,000, it needs to have Wendy's approval. In excess of $50,000, it needs to have the board's approval. So.
I feel like I had another slide in here that I might have deleted that also talked about that we create a report every year about all of the fundraising that takes place. So.
Yep. And that's a new piece of the law, or not the law. It's not really law. It is just a piece of our policy, just so we can monitor and make sure that we are following the equity between the schools and that people aren't trying to sneak donations in. And I hate to use the word sneak. Let me think of a different word. Just put donations in that are outside of our policy, just to make sure that we're keeping a good watch on it.
And the relationship of the foundation to this, will you just speak to that?
So for years and years, the donation was the primary way people made donations, and each of the schools had an account. Through the foundation. When the schools wanted to spend it, they had to go and ask the foundation board to approve the expenditure, and then it could be reimbursed. It was a little bit cumbersome, and they were asking about whether it was really part of their scope, and as the foundation approving a lot of these expenditures. So I went to the IRS. They gave us, the district, a letter of determination, which means that people can give the district donations directly that are tax deductible. So the only caveat in there is if a foundation or a group has to have a 501c3 to donate to, they will have to go to the foundation board and ask for permission to do the donation, because that's something that the foundation really wants to make sure that they have a handle on, is who's giving money and what is it for, and does it fit within our bylaws that they've created as a foundation. So we are not circumventing the foundation. A lot of districts do, but a lot of the district's foundations are run by district personnel. Ours are not, ours is not. We do have people who sit on the board, Caleb and Shauna do an amazing job, and Ricardo, they work on the foundation financials, but the day-to-day operations is not a district hired position. It is a separate fund that's just reported. If you look at the financials, it's a blended component, so it's over on the right. It does not even get reported in our main financials in our financial report. So
I don't know if this is more of a procedure, but on fundraising, are certain entities allowed to use like outside Venmos to collect money? So is that part of, I mean,
so here's the thing with Venmo. Venmo has some really, really strong rules for business donations. And so you lose every ounce of transparency if the donation goes to a person. In fact, I just had someone ask me today if it was okay if they just took a Venmo and then just wrote a check for it. It breaks a lot of Venmo rules. If you are taking things that are not personal on Venmo, you could be required to pay for a business account, which is a lot more expensive. I mean, way more expensive because a personal Venmo doesn't usually cost anything. Plus you lose any kind of tracking ability. So if people are taking donations, how do we know we got every single donation that came in through that Venmo? And there's no.
How do you know the money got back to the school?
Correct. There is no way of knowing. So we looked at Venmo as a district, but the cost to have a Venmo was pretty prohibitive because of the fees that are associated with all of the donations that come in.
But there's like a procedure that says do not use personal Venmo.
And our cash and receipt policy, it talks about no Venmo.
Okay.
And no personal.
I was just thinking that through.
And I'll double check. I'm pretty sure I've talked about that a million times.
Sometimes they'll do a car wash or something like that. I'm just throwing out what I've seen.
Yeah. Is there a procedure with this 6110? I should know this.
There are some procedures and there's a form for the fundraiser. Yep. So so really what the programs are required to do at the school is to fill out a form and have the principal approve it. So the principal can approve any fundraising, and they need to. And they need, because I don't know if any of you have experienced 12 people showing up on your doorstep selling the same card. But for 12 different organizations, it becomes a little bit onerous when everybody's doing the same one. So one of the reasons for that approval process is so that they are kind of spreading out the love and not having one group fundraise all year, which takes away some of the opportunities for that other group.
But to Melanie's question, could we put on the procedure somewhere just explicit restatement?
I would love
not
to.
to use personal.
I will add
no
that on.
Venmos or whatever.
Yep.
I know I feel like at one time we were talking about using Success Fund.
Yep, we do use Success Fund. Yep, Success Fund is used. That's our
That's the way that we handle most
either
of
that
this,
or checks. Lots of people with smaller donations like to write a check because the Success Fund is at 5% and $1. So if you're giving a $10 donation, the school would get $8 and $8, so or $8.50. So Success Fund does give you the option of paying for the fees so that the school gets 10 and the donation costs $11.50. But quite a few people actually use that. But when you're getting a $10 donation and it's not much money, it does tend to derail it a little bit. So.
All right, facility rentals. You have 2 minutes.
Ooh, I can do this one in two minutes. So this is just to clarify some of the rules on renting and costs for some of those groups that are really related to the schools. So things like bantam clubs and feeder programs, so that they're not being outpriced by some of the and it also goes through and recategorizes who is who. So you have category 1, which is your political and the party.
Republican Party
yes,
conventions.
Republican and Democratic. They both use it this year. And then you've got
I put it
the
up there.
school, oh, thank you.
You're
The
welcome.
school-related I thought I was gonna be tested, this is
No,
awesome.
no, I gave you a cheat
School-related
sheet.
organizations, and then your nonprofit and charitable, and your commercial use. A couple of things that I put in here because it wasn't being done very successfully is making sure that there is supervision at the school and making sure that there is a way to really split those profits with the schools so that they actually can use that for some of their upkeep on their building and some of their programs. Just some of the things that are still required, they still are required to fill out the permit, which is the application for use, the indemnity agreement, and liability insurance are always required. And the district is now managing all of the rentals. And we will be doing it on a 3-month rotation. So December, right now we will rent November, December, January. Then in November we'll start December, January, February. And a lot of that is to just keep the schools clear for those programs that may pop up that they don't have scheduled at the beginning of the year. Because otherwise we do have a clause in there that we can cancel rentals at any time, but we want to make sure that the schools have first right of use.
I think just 2 things I wanted to mention about this. We've had situations where different individuals in the community have gotten preferential treatment because they know somebody at the school and they are not paying anything, whereas somebody else would also like to access it for similar reasons, and then all of a sudden they're given, you know, a rental fee that's significantly higher. This just creates equity across the board, and you saw that it had in the rental agreement, it shows the different categories and how much it costs for each of those pieces. So sometimes, you know, if there are individuals that are really questioning what that amount is, they'll say, well, I can't even believe this, it's just this league that's doing it, but they're renting a facility for 15 hours. They need someone that's going to run the scoreboard, they need lights, and so that's expensive because if it's the football stadium, it's going to be $100 an hour, so, or more.
Yeah, and just the turf field is $100 an hour, but you know, we all saw how much a turf field is to replace. Yeah. And we don't want to accelerate the use or the need to replace fields by letting everybody else do it. You know, a lot of people argue, well, but you're a school, you're a community center. I said, so is the rec center. You can call them and ask for one of their fields. That's what their purpose is for the recreation and for leagues. And so, but they charge a rental fee, and maybe that's about equal or higher than what we were. I mean, it was pretty high for some people, but what they're asking for is labor intensive and our resource intensive. So,
how will someone access the form to fill out?
It'll be online.
Okay.
And so our rates are comparable and or cheaper than like
our rates
school
are comparable
districts,
and or cheaper to Alpine and Evo.
Okay,
Especially and they're lower when you get into the school-related use than they are at the other.
And school-related use, we're talking like theater programs that specifically support our school, not traveling leagues or things like that, but something that actually is feeding, say, a Provo or a
And the
TMP
principal
program.
actually has to approve them as a school-related theater. Yep.
I don't remember seeing anything, maybe I missed it. Do we have anything in here about how they would go about renting something? Like they have to contact someone
At
at the
very
district or the
beginning, it
principal?
talks about contacting the district facilities department.
Okay, it's not the principal anymore.
It's not the principal anymore. It's the district who
Oh,
will.
there it is,
The
right.
form says grand total charge instead of grand.
Oh, okay.
See, that's why
That's
our
well,
recommendation is
I
to put
did-
it on the website for review, and then we'll bring it on November 21st.
So I-
The form
It's a
also
grand
has
I was
1,
also-
2, 3, and 5.
Oh, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Oh.
There were 5 categories at some point in time.
Yeah.
I will have Olivia fix that for me. So, I also wanted it to give myself a couple weeks before we did it, so that the Provo High, who is the one who rents the most, could review it and make sure we touched on everything that was their concern. So, and they have reviewed it and they're fine with it.
And this will go, Rebecca and I had someone email us about
Oh, I'm
this
sure you did.
specifically. And this will go up tomorrow on the website or soon? Okay.
But with the realization that the person who's contacting you is a for-profit organization, so if it's the same person that's contacting the rest of the world,
It's for commercial use.
it's a commercial
Category
use,
4.
and they're actually charging admission to.
Oh, I don't know.
And so
I don't know if
it
this is.
could
It's
very
the
well
same,
be.
it's the same person that probably contacted me a couple weeks ago and I explained all of the same things, and
Okay.
so they're just going higher up the chain.
Okay.
We're over time. I have one quick question on this. Can we be really sure to communicate this out to, or make sure schools are communicating? I don't, somehow I want this communicated out because one of the pieces of feedback I've received is that it's just being like dropped on these groups and they're being surprised with it. And it is a big change, so I don't know the best way to communicate this out to people.
And that's one of
but-
the reasons I sent it to the principal and the athletic director at the school, is because I wanted them to get their eyes on it and be able to start kind of communicating. And it'll be out there on the website for them to look at.
Well, yeah, I'll work with.
I just think there's a lot of people that have no idea that it's gonna be up for, and that it's not on the website. You know what I mean? They
Totally fine.
Yeah. Okay, we're over time. We'll just take our board handbook discussion into the business meeting. So is there a motion to adjourn our study session?
I move that we adjourn our study session.
Thank you. Motion made by Board Member Boyce. We're adjourned, and we'll reconvene in the PDC. Let's try and no more than 10 minutes.
5.
So you can go. That's why I said no more than.
We need more bathrooms. I need a district office with more bathrooms.
Every place.